afternoon, everyone. This is Sam Drew with the National Dropout Prevention Center, and I'm here with my co-host and colleague, Marty Duckenfield, also with the center, and we welcome all of you to this monthly radio webcast brought to you by the National Dropout Prevention Center at Clemson University and in partnership with Clemson Radio Productions and the generous support of Penn Foster.
Well, hello, everybody. I don't know what it's like where you are, but in Clemson, it's an absolutely beautiful spring day. So if you've taken time out of your schedule to listen to us, we appreciate it. We are so glad to be with you. We're happy to come inside today because we've got a very special program on solutions to the dropout crisis. Many of you are listening for the first time, and so we particularly want to welcome you, but we always love having our loyal listeners with us today. So, hey, we got a great program today, a special feature, Sam, this particular time, with our guest here in the studio. But first of all, let me remind our listeners about, and tell our new listeners about the materials that we have on the website. Before you get started, you need to get out the slideshow, which our presenter will be using today for the presentation. And this is, in fact, a PowerPoint that supports the entire discussion. So have that open and ready. Now, I want to point out some of these other resources that are on the page here. Gosh, I'm looking at that screen right now. There's some incredible information here about all kinds of topics because our topic today is multifaceted. And so, as you'll see, there is a wide variety of resources here to support the discussion today. Point out one particular piece, that article about the achievement gap, especially among minority populations. There's some articles about recruitment of teachers from these populations. There's that UCLA Civil Rights Project website, excellent. We have a video with our old service-owning friend from Minnesota, the late Bernard Gill, who spoke with us just over a year ago regarding the special issues related to African-American males. So please check that one out. And all in all, we've got some good resources here and a great program ahead.
These resources, Marty, always make up an important part of this broadcast. You know, we only have an hour here with our listeners, and this hour is designed to really whet your appetite. And then we have all these wonderful resources for you to go to for further study. And we were talking among ourselves this morning and realized that we're getting a lot more hits on our archived versions of these programs, and we're very happy about that. We know that people are accessing these for personal in-service, and they also make excellent teacher in-service topics, particularly at this time of the year, toward the end of the year here, and when principals are beginning to plan for their in-services for next year. This is a wonderful source of topics for those in-services on this important issue of dropout prevention.
And that library that we have online there is growing by the month, and it's becoming quite a package, and we're pretty pleased with how that's adding up. Now, we do love to have you participate if you can, and if you're interested in talking with our guest today. So because this is a live radio webcast, those of you who are listening live today, you can call in and ask questions and discuss issues with our guest. We have a toll-free number. It's 888-539-8859. And if you're calling from outside the U.S., the number is 864-656-4549. Now, call any time during the program. Feel free to interrupt us because we do like to talk with you, and we're very happy to put you on hold for a minute till we finish a sentence, and then we're going to dive in and see what kind of questions you might have for us. So we'll try to get to all those questions should you have them today. Now, we also accept email questions. I've got my computer set up here to receive your email questions. The address would be ndpc@clemson.edu, and put the word solutions in the subject line, and we'll try to get to those questions as well.
Thank you, Marty. And we are looking forward to your calls and questions today. It adds much more to the program when you're interacting with our guest. We tend to dominate the discussion here because we get very involved with the guests also, and we have questions. But we don't forget about you, and we will put your question up front if you call in, and feel free to interrupt us at any time. disagree with what we're saying, agree with what we're saying, or ask something totally different. But we do want your participation today. So remember those numbers, and I'll give those to you again in just a moment. We're very pleased this month to have as our guest, and he's actually in the studio with us, and that's been a rare occasion lately. Roy Jones, who directs the Call Me Mr. program, a program that you'll hear about today, and we're very pleased to have him with us. Roy, there's so much that we could say about you, but we prefer really that our listeners learn more about you through your work, and so we'll do that and just welcome you to the program and say we're so happy to have you with us today.
Fair enough, and thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation about such a critical subject and one that is so important for our communities to understand. And I certainly, again, thank you for having me.
Well, the solution that you present today is an interesting one because it is so all-encompassing of the message that we try to send through the National Dropout Prevention Center, and I know everyone is going to be interested in hearing about that today. Let me take just a second to give you one more reminder to call us with your questions and give you the numbers again. Toll free, the number is 888-539-8859. If you're calling from outside of the U.S., it's 864-656-4549. Roy, the Call Me Mr. program under your leadership has really distinguished itself in many ways, and I'm sure we will hear about some of those during the broadcast. But in past discussions that we've had with you, it has occurred to me that the program really addresses so many of the strategies advocated by the National Dropout Prevention Center. And it does that in a myriad of ways. It's very systemic in its approach, I think, and in addressing some critical issues that we have in education, and particularly as those issues relate to kids that are at risk of dropping out of school. And you've prepared an excellent PowerPoint for us, and I think we'll just get started with that. I know you begin with some data and statistics that kind of lay a background for us, and our readers, I'm sure, are aware of most of these, but it's always good to say it again because they're impressive and they really lay a groundwork for the kind of program that you direct.
Mm-hmm. Though that is, and thank you, Sam, and certainly it's true. We have to develop and understand the framework of the problem, and as gloom and doom as it is, the reality of the challenges that we all confront in addressing these issues with our youth and our children is very important to understand. So I'll spend a minute talking about the problem-centered part of this conversation, but what I'm really excited about is the solution-oriented approach that the National Dropout Center has so well addressed in the previous broadcast. But let's talk about that. And I'm going to start also with, and the data I'll share doesn't cover the waterfront, but it does address how we began and why we began as the Call Me Mr. program. First of all, we need to understand that in so many of our inner cities, especially, more than half of all African American men do not finish high school. 98% of African American children do attend public schools. And within that, African American children comprise 17% of the student population, but constitute often almost 40% of students placed in special education, and only 3% of gifted and talented students. And African American males specifically represent less than 1% within that gifted and talented student pool. African American teachers comprise 6% of teachers in the United States. African American males comprise but 1% of U.S. teachers, and white females comprise 83% of U.S. elementary teachers. Over 40% of public school teachers send their children to private schools. According to the U.S. Census, in the last couple of years, there are more African American and Latino males that will spend tonight in a prison cell than in a college dormitory. Ron Edmonds, who we're very familiar with in education, was leader in the Effective Schools movement, once said that we can, whenever and wherever we choose, successfully teach all children whose schooling is of interest to us. We already know more than we need to do that. Whether or not we do it must finally depend on how we feel about the fact that we have not done it so far.
And you know how true those words ring today. When we do presentations out in the field to school districts across the country, we phrase that a little differently, but we're saying pretty much the same thing Rod Edmonds did years ago, and that is that the good news about dropout prevention is that we know what works. Mm-hmm. And the bad news is that we're just not applying the knowledge that we have.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely true. And we've so as you look at some of the grim statistics, and I know I represented the African American communities in particular, of course, in South Carolina. The African American population community wide is about 40% of the state, but yet when we look at numbers like suspension rates, referral rates, dropout rates, as well as expulsion rates, the disproportionate number of black boys that are suspended and referred for discipline and expelled and drop out is extremely high, as is the prison population in our state is 65% of the state's prison population, which is very consistent across the South. These are numbers that are unimaginable, and yet they've remained steadfast over the past decade. We attempted, Sam, to address this issue by recognizing that there were fewer than 1% of teachers in South Carolina that were African American males at the elementary school level. We saw this as a significant shortage within the school community when you consider that there are over 600 elementary schools in South Carolina, served by over 20,000 teachers. That literally means that with less than 1%, we found 10 years ago that the number of black males teaching at the elementary school numbered less than 200 out of that 20,000 teachers. That's why when many of our students came to us wanting to pursue teaching as a profession, one of the questions we asked them, each one, and we do this to this day, how many of them have experienced a black male as a teacher at the elementary school level, or any male, for that matter, as a teacher at the elementary school level. And 90% of them didn't take long when they reflected, but actually had to say that they have never had a male teacher coming through their formative years at the early child elementary level, and did not until they got into secondary school, and that's only because they were pursued athletics and may have had a male as a coach. So that says a lot about that. Yet the experience in terms of the failure rate, the at-risk rates of black males is extremely high throughout the educational background, especially, and it starts at the elementary school. In fact, I've heard, and I believe this, that the first place that many children have learned how to fail and learned where to fail was in a public school. When they didn't know really what failure meant until it was defined for them once they broke into in public school. So things like not reading on grade level, not doing math on grade level, very early in their career as a student have often led to being at risk of failure, and certainly at risk if they're held back, as you well know, dropping out. So we attempted to address this corner of the problem. We're not all things to everybody, but we felt if we began to increase the number and address the shortage of African American males that would teach on the elementary level, that we could begin to systemically, if you will, using your word, address this glaring problem in our public schools in South Carolina. We also felt 10 years ago, under the vision at that time of Dr. Tom Parks, who is now retired professor out of this Eugene T. Moore School of Education Leadership Program, that we felt that Call Me Mr. could easily become and had the potential to be a national model for deserving of replication throughout the United States. So that's what we began to address. So if you go to our the slide that Newsweek represented, saying that the headline was "Come Back, Mr. Chips," the takeoff from the movie Mr. Chips, and the number of male teachers, according to the National Education Association, is at a 40-year low in our schools. South Carolina reflects one of those states that is struggling, particularly in placing males in the classroom of any race.
We were talking earlier today about a survey of elementary children. I believe it was first graders. This was probably 8 to 10 years ago, asking them, what did they see themselves when they grow up? That typical question. And these were children in an educationally disadvantaged, low poverty area. And their answers were the top 5 were, and this is all children: teacher, sports or entertainment star, I think policeman, someone at the gas station, and drug dealer. And this is concrete people they saw in their lives. And I think the interesting issue here is who was listed. But if you ask just the boys that, would you hear teacher?
It is very doubtful you would hear teacher over maybe a athlete or an entertainer, as you reflected, and not even as a coach. But we have to recognize that you really can't be what you don't see or can't see. No one aspires to be what they can't see, and what they. And again, it relates to the data I shared earlier. There are simply it is years into their education, if ever, that they honestly can relate or identify a male teacher in their life that has made a difference. And so there would be very little incentive or motivation for them to want to become a teacher. And teaching, and especially again at the elementary level, is a female dominated profession, and has been throughout our lifetimes, for sure. And I can't remember, at an early time in my life in school, ever saying, I want to be a teacher. There's no declaration. In fact, if you did, you'd find yourself in trouble by many. Your peers would be critical of you, and Dad didn't necessarily pat you on the back for wanting to be a third grade teacher, aspiring to be a third grade teacher. It's something you'd keep to yourself if you had that aspiration. And it's interesting because what we found is that when the Call Me Mr. program was introduced almost 10 years ago, that young men began to come out of the woodwork, saying, this is something I always wanted to be. It was one of my choices, but I didn't think there was anybody that there was any money for it or any support for it, and therefore they didn't make it their wishes known until Call Me Mr. was introduced, and we created a kind of attraction, and made it okay to want to be a male and a male of color and want to be a teacher. So that's I think that's true, that when we create the model, and I think it was in the literature we've all shared, that you need mentoring, and you need to have positive images or role models, if you will, to attract that kind of interest. And it's an economic issue, because when you consider that if former Governor and U.S. Secretary Riley was correct, we're looking at America having to replace 3 million teachers within the next couple of decades. And that means there are jobs out there, irrespective of what may be going on in the country right now. The fact of the matter is, as long as we're going to have schools, there will be a need for teachers. And as teachers retire, we're not keeping up with that loss. And so from a purely economic point of view, we've been producing teachers for the past 6-7 years, and not one of our guys have failed to receive job offers. Mm-hmm. Now, how many professions that are coming out of college majors can say that? So we're very pleased with the fact that we can compete on several levels. Now, there's a different argument about how much they're paid, but certainly, having a beginning salary and beginning a career is a valuable start. And when you're on the right track, as many of our guys are, that are misters, and professionally, they find themselves now pursuing graduate study and advancing through their career.
Roy, I'm wondering, what is the retention rate of your misters as far as staying in the profession? I mean, I know it's only been a few years, but are they most of them staying in teaching?
Very good. We have among our first cohort, and they'll be going into their 6th year. They graduated in 2004, so going into 2009, they would actually be going into their 5th year. They would have fulfilled basically their obligation to give back a year of service for every year of support that they received. Everyone that began in our first cohort is still teaching, and several have already achieved their masters, and several others are pursuing their masters or graduate study, because we have a couple that are pursuing doctorates. We are batting 100%. That started in the profession, and that will lead, as we continue our conversation. There are reasons for that. That's not by accident.
Yeah.
There are no accidents.
That's what I was going to say. I think listen up, everybody, because normally that is not the percentage at all. It's like 1 out of 3, or probably even worse. So I think we all need to find out what you do and call me Mister.
Outstanding. I was afraid you'd never ask. Well, as you know, Mister stands for Mentors Instructing Students through Effective Role Modeling. It's designed as a servant leadership, a servant leader program with a co-curriculum model associated with it. Now, what does that mean in layman terms? I came through college a few years ago. That's a joke. But what I learned as an undergraduate is the value of having a cohort model that is associated in having a collegial relationship with your peers and with the professionals that are involved with your education. No one who is successful, and I challenge this, no matter what your vocation, what your industry is, no one can claim success and not without pointing to a significant person in their life that served as a mentor or served as a guiding force, or even as a leader that helped get them through the tough times. And what I learned early as an undergraduate is that it was valuable having a cohort model for support services and for advice and for really addressing many issues that can really trip you up, that are non-academic, that are outside of the classroom, that are, emotional, psychological issues and personal issues that come up that can really derail just about anybody. Well, when Call Me Mister was developed, it was developed on this cohort design, that it was important that recruitment and retention be seen as one and the same, that you recruit with the idea to retain, that if you recruit and you do not have a structure, an infrastructure in place to assist students to be successful and create the success path that they need, then it becomes a revolving door. And we've seen a few examples of that throughout the country, where recruitment is placed as a priority, but students are left really on their own to make it. And having never navigated a system as sophisticated as a college or university, many of our students are first generation college students. So where would they have gotten, the preparation, to enter into, especially a D1 college university like Clemson, much less, or not as much so, but at a smaller college where you've got 1,500. Versus a college that's got looking at 15,000. That's a real challenge, and somebody has to recognize that there's a need to have positive peer relationships as well as sound professional guidance to get you through, to help you navigate the system. And at some point you figure out where you are and who you are, and it kind of all gets, you get in focus in the right direction. Then you can begin to think about how to pass Praxis 1 or Praxis 2 and become certified and become a professional teacher. So the cohort model is incredibly valuable, and that's what we rely on, with a servant leader philosophy, that you learn to serve as a pre-service teacher and as a professional teacher, and you develop your leadership by engaging and taking action to positively impact your environment, whether it's the school community, whether it's the general community, whether it's among your peers as well. So that said, we have created a infrastructure, a conceptual framework whereby our pre-service students are involved in positive ways with children and youth, middle school and as well as high school, immediately upon stepping foot on a college campus, while at the same time they're learning to develop and understand their personal stories, many of which are embarrassing to them because they think their personal stories are not they're not necessarily healthy ones, or are ones that they're not comfortable with. But we quickly get to a point where we help them understand how powerful their personal story can be, especially as they aspire to become teachers, that they come from the same environments, from the same backgrounds, from the same socioeconomic classes that they're going to find their students in. And unless they begin to overcome the challenges that those backgrounds have represented, then they're going to have a difficult time helping their students to get to that point. Now, that's not the case with all of our students. Students come from solid two-parent families. We have students come from single-parent families, raised by grandmothers, raised by mothers and fathers. So it's not, we're not stereotyping our guys and being in one form or another. But at the same time, we certainly have young men who are challenged regardless of their family structure, and we got to get them quickly to a point of preparation. So we're a servant leadership model. We're a co-curriculum. All of our students are required to meet the requirements that lead through a teacher education program that eventually lead to certification by the state. Everyone's required to do that. This we're talking about extends beyond the formal education, the formal classroom. Service learning is, I know, a large piece of the National Dropouts resource and research. Servant learning is very much a heavy part of our co-curriculum, and it is important that students take the theory that they learn in class and apply it immediately to their community, to enrichment programs, to after-school programs, to schools, to housing projects. Wherever there are children that need support and need mentoring is where we find them, and we do that through what we call the co-curriculum.
Can we take a second here, because I have these notes that there's an interesting distinction between being a role model, a positive role model, and being a mentor.
Absolutely.
And I think your emphasis on both as different things is an important thing to acknowledge here and to describe to our listeners how you see each of those roles.
Yeah, we define them very differently. Many people use role modeling and mentoring interchangeably, and they're actually very, very different. The fact of the matter is, everybody is a role model. The question is whether or not they're a positive one or a negative one. Many of the images that our children emulate, adults strongly believe are negative role models because they have a negative influence. When you consider that we lose half of our student population K to 12 drop out, are not finishing high school, and students of color, it's 60% that don't finish high school along the way. So what happens to those children? And certainly you're talking about talented children who have had great potential to be successful that don't get through high school. Well, what happens to them is that they're recruited by gangs, they're recruited by other peers. Maybe they might find the military, but certainly all of them tend to be, or the masses tend to be unemployed or unemployable with very few skills. So gangs is a growing concern in our community, growing in South Carolina. We used to think there were, in California and New York, the largest cities in the United States, or up north somewhere in the large, Chicago's of the world, Detroit's. But no, we've got them right here in rural South Carolina, right here in Greenville, South Carolina, right here in Charleston, South Carolina. They're role models. And they are able to recruit effectively, more effectively than many of us with all the degrees and letters behind our name. They're very effective at recruitment because they provide what the comfort and security and the loving relationships as it's perceived that the children desperately need. That's not where I would want to advise and direct students to be. I'm an educator. I believe in public schools. I believe in education as a model. I believe that it is a requirement for success in our world. So I think that role modeling says that you can be like I am. You see me, you can be like me. You can be like Mike. You can be like LeBron. You see me, you can be. But the fact of the matter is 99.9% of our children can't be like LeBron. They can't be like Mike. They'll never see Mike. They'll never talk to Mike. And maybe if they go to a basketball game, they'll be close enough to the court to hear the grunts and groans of a ball game. But that's the closest that they're going to come. So it's unlikely that you're going to be able to be that role model or a rapper on stage. That's just not where the majority of our children are. Doesn't mean they can't aspire to be athletes or entertainers. It's just not where they are. But a teacher, you can reach out and touch. You can pull on a pant leg, and it's somebody that you can relate to, that you can connect to. But our misters promote mentoring, and we have a trilateral mentoring system. And basically mentoring says, look, this is where you are. This is who you are. We've got to find the latent gifts, talent, attributes, and virtues that are within you, so that you can, so that we can cultivate those and grow those, so that you can become who you are and what you're destined to be. That's what mentoring does. It is based on a relationship. It's not a distant kind of relationship. It's a close, trusting relationship, because children you can lead children wherever you want to lead them if they trust you and they believe and perceive that you believe in them and love them. So mentoring says, this is who you are. Let's find your gifts. It may be drawing. It may be writing prose. It may be athletics. It may be debating. It could be anything. But we find out where they are. The most difficult kid in a classroom, and we've had them in teaching, may actually be the most talented kid in the classroom. They're making noise. They're hyperactive. They won't sit down. They won't be quiet. They won't do anything we ask them to do. They disturb the class all the time. But we've got to figure out how to manage that kid in a way that says to him, don't lose that enthusiasm. We can grow, develop that enthusiasm into something great. And that's what they need to be able to do. We have examples of misters who, and I'm thinking of one in particular, Mark Joseph and Hayward John, Hayward John and Michael Barron, have had examples of children who have entered their classrooms as misters. They were teaching 4th, 5th grade. Children who have failed grade prior have gotten nothing but F's and D's, have been held back, get into a mister's classroom and literally turn it around and be honor roll students in 1 year's time. And the only difference anybody can identify is that there's been a teacher change, and there's been but that kid in an academic year went from fail to honor student in a year's time. And I believe it has a lot to do with the philosophy that you must first find a student before you can teach a student. And that's where we are with that.
I think that's such an important distinction, role model and mentor, and the whole premise that to be an effective mentor requires a real relationship. Most of us know of Bill Daggett and his tenets of rigor, relevance, and relationships. I was doing a session recently with him down in Florida and said, I think you're right on track, but I think you have it backwards. And that it really is relationships. If you have to have a relationship with a child first in order to really get to that child and influence them, then relevance, connecting curriculum to what's really relevant in that child's life, and then you can get rigor into the curriculum. So,
well, it sounds like the Mr. program does a good job of preparing these young men to establish those kind of relationships with students, because we all yearn to, but obviously you're doing something in Call Me Mr. that gives them those skills and those abilities and that outreach to young people, to their students.
Yeah, it's Marty. A large part of it is exposure. It first starts with the Mr. himself. They have to begin to understand who they are and articulate that. So part of it is, and they do that within the cohort. They meet regularly on a weekly basis, often bi-weekly, but certainly regularly. We even have opportunities in which the entire network of statewide misters get together on twice a year. But on a day-to-day basis, we're a living, learning community. So misters are rooming with each other. They're living in the same dormitories. They are typically bonded as friends, and are in class together. So they have a conversation that is common, both formally, intellectually, as well as outside of the classroom settings, where they share with each other in ways that they would not share with faculty or administrators. There was a time in which I had to visit dormitories to see where folks were and what they were doing. I don't have to do that with misters. Their peers keep up with them, because they know if they weren't in class with them, they want to go back and find out why they weren't in class, if they weren't sick or could not make it. So there's a checks and balances and an accountability system that's built in, that they're accountable to each other. We indeed are our brother's keeper in that sense. We have to be responsible for each other, for everyone to grow. You have to have those relationships. So as a living learning model, in a servant leadership model, we believe that we're responsible for the growth of each other, and we will assess that each and every semester that they're involved in our program. Growth is what we're looking for, and many times it's not easy to discern, but honestly, there can be a tremendous amount of growth in a very short period of time that others can observe, and it's having that kind of feedback that is so often important. And when you're extending yourself, when you're actually serving, when you're tutoring, when you're mentoring, when you're assisting children with their both their homework and the other issues they may have, you're out of yourself. You're giving yourself, and it makes a world of a difference to see yourself in a role that you may never have been in before in your life. That's one of being in a mentor role. That's why it's tri-level. It's professional to student, student to student and student to child. So we strongly believe in the model. We have several outreach programs that are part of our Mr. Network. One in particular, there's a couple in particular actually. One is the Project Middle Passage, where we work with middle school students as a college access pathway to success kind of model. We help them prepare academically for improvement in school and their grades, as well as advancement toward college. And so we work with 5 middle schools in 4 counties, serving over 130 boys in particular. And that has been a tremendous success, where our misters are involved in mentoring on that piece. Our conceptual framework, as I'm reminded, is one ultimately to graduate 200 misters through the Call Me Mister program, which would double the number of African American males specifically within the state of South Carolina teaching at the elementary level. We do it through recruitment and retention. We do it through our co-curriculum. We do it through our mentoring, our and peer programming, and of course the teacher education programs that are in or within our 15 colleges and universities within South Carolina, because we have a variety. We started 10 years ago with a partnership of Clemson and 3 private HBCUs, historically black colleges. That's Claflin University, Benedict College, and Morris College. It has grown to 15 to include a network of 2-year colleges, as well as other 4-year colleges and universities that are traditionally white institutions, such as College of Charleston and Anderson University has recently come on board. University of South Carolina, Beaufort is involved with our program as well. So, and Clemson University, of course, does have an undergraduate program as well. We have graduated over 50 misters that will be teaching in public schools in South Carolina in 2009 at various stages, of course, of experience, 5-6 years to rookies just coming out. And we have 150 within the Call Me Mr. Network among all of our colleges and universities that if we didn't recruit another soul, we would meet our goal if all of them, when all of them graduate, of course.
Have you been able to extend the program beyond South Carolina? Are there institutions in other states participating?
Yes, we have. We're in 7 states altogether, including South Carolina, and South Carolina has led the way through its state legislature. We've been fortunate to get off the ground initially 10 years ago with private corporate foundation money, the Sunshine Lady Foundation, Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, and the BMW Corporation, the automaker, as well as Michelin, have all been strategic partners in our initial growth and development, and some are still very much involved. But the South Carolina State Legislature has recognized the value of Call Me Mister to the state, and has provided funding through the state as well. That has in turn inspired other states like Pennsylvania and Florida to provide funding for their development of their Mister programs in those 2 states through the state legislatures, while others have provided it through institutional colleges. The colleges have provided funding and support, as well as other private sources as well. We have continued to grow as a result of developing our formal licensing agreements. We are probably at the point where, future growth or continued growth will depend upon availability of additional resources. None of the funding that comes through South Carolina leaves South Carolina, because our support of misters within South Carolina, or even if they're recruited from outside of South Carolina, they must provide service back as teachers back in our state of South Carolina. It's the same with Pennsylvania and Florida, for example, is that, students that come out of Florida will teach come from Florida and teach in Florida. Students that come out of Pennsylvania will be in Pennsylvania, but we provide the model for development in both of those programs. So it's Call Me Mr. National Initiative uses the same model, but it's a grow your own model. So they come out of those states, help them develop their co-curriculum, and they remain in those states. So we do orientations. We do leadership development through our summer internship program, as well as our leadership institute that we host here at Clemson University every summer that we've been doing for the past about 6 years. So we have an intensive summer program. So when everyone is leaving, we're just getting started again through the summer with our 8-week internship program and our 4-day leadership institute. Where we bring in students from throughout the state as well as outside of South Carolina.
You told us a story earlier this morning when we were chatting about a typical mister, I would think, who is in an elementary school, and he's so engaged in what he's doing with the children there and with the school that he's different than a typical pre-service teacher going into schools for the first time. And there's something going on, and I think because the curriculum is pretty standard what pre-service teachers have to take, it's in this co-curriculum, which I wish you would take a little time, more time here explaining what are some of the things that do go on that the misters participate in that it's not seen normally in pre-service teacher education, and it is outside the curriculum, but it's seeming to make a different product, if you will, and I think that story about that young man is worth sharing as well, Roy.
Yeah, and this is meaning no offense to our fellow teachers that may be listening, but quite honestly, we challenge our misters to stay out of the teacher lounges in the schools and be totally engaged in with the children, and that engagement means that whether it's having lunch, engagement outside of the classroom or formal classroom setting, whether it's lunching with the children, whether it's if there is an after school program, and being involved with the after school program, and if there's no after school program and there's a need for one, starting one. So we've had misters actually begin after school programs because there is a need for additional support of children. Whatever you can do to be creative ways you can lend your particular talent to an environment, we challenge our misters to do that. You know, you be the change that you expect, and that's our attitude. If there's a problem that is perceived, don't be among those that are just talking about the problem or beating that to death, and certainly don't be among those that are pointing fingers, blaming the children for being children. We want you to be the change that you expect to see in the world, and that's the philosophy, that's the attitude that misters have, and what they engage in, what they introduce to an environment. You're referring to one of our teachers, Hayward John, and I'll name a couple, but Hayward John recently sent me an email with a link that showed him being interviewed by a Columbia TV station, and it was not just him, but it was also one of the children in his class that were being interviewed on this particular TV program just recently. And they were doing the program, and they introduced as well his entire a segment of the school children that participated in a concert that they sponsored at the school that was very uniquely put together. And we're talking about it's more than it wasn't your typical concert. It was an attempt to engage the entire school in a project that viewed that had the students as centerpiece. They would perform the lyrics that was focused on developing language skills. That teachers were also involved in developing lyrics that were put to music. So they developed prose that had a kind of a rhythmic background to it that sounded like a rap, looked like a rap. The students performed it like a rap, but it was designed to increase vocabulary, increase language skills, and did it in a very creative, artistic way. And those teachers who did not believe for a minute that they had it in them to develop rap found themselves doing exactly that, because they were shown and it was demonstrated that they could. If they just put the words on paper, Mr. John would do the rest, and which he did. And so it changed. It had an impact on the entire school culture. Of course, during the concert, it was a concert sponsored by the school that, of course, involved all of the parents in the community. So it was standing room only. Hundreds and hundreds of parents and children came out to the concert, and it made such an impression on the local media that it was covered by the newspaper, and it got the attention of Columbia TV station. It was all done at Marshall Elementary School in Orangeburg. So you're talking about Columbia coming into Orangeburg to cover this happening at Marshall Elementary School. And the beauty that I see is what is amazing is that that's the kind of attention that you get in sports when you got a big game, or athletics when you got a big game, that the media is attracted to, seeing what's going on. And that's the kind of change that we like to see in the school community, in the culture. It required leadership from the principal. It requires initiative by a teacher. It requires cooperation by teachers, cooperation with parents, and certainly commitment by the children. It all came together, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful occasion.
Well, I think your story has excited one of our listeners, because we have a call from Kentucky, from Eastern Kentucky University. Sherwood Thompson, welcome to Solutions, and what would you like to discuss with Roy Jones?
I'd like to know what role, if any, are parents playing in the Call Me Mr. program?
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, there's Sherwood, I know your voice. I know you're out there. Sherwood is, I must tell you, folks, is one of the leaders in Kentucky. Kentucky is coming on board as a Call Me Mr. Initiative in Kentucky at Eastern Kentucky University. Appreciate his call. Parents are vital in the process, especially in work as we work with the children of all of our outreach programs as well as our schools. We cannot be successful, especially when I consider our Project Middle Passage or any one of our elementary effort initiatives. We believe we cannot be truly successful without participation and involvement of parents. The parent cannot be left out of the equation. We're kind of an old school kind of a philosophy when it comes to home visits and involving the community, with a new school, new technology approach with how sharp our guys are in terms of their preparation. But the old school commitment to going back into the home, walking the community, and getting a connection between that community and the teacher, the school, and the student is absolutely vital. You cannot have success without the connection of parent. And parent being defined in the broadest sense of the word. It doesn't necessarily have to be a biological parent. It can be a guardian. It can be whoever the significant adult is in that child's life is who we want to reach. And at the elementary level, we find that it's much more likely to get a parent involved at the elementary level than as students grow through their educational career. So it's vital, it's important, it's absolutely necessary, and we're going to do, and we've always done anything we could do to help bring that message home.
Thank you.
When you talk about parents, you think about others in the community who you partner with, and certainly there's the community organizations, but there's also this higher ed piece to it. So just that whole nature of the partnerships, that's such an important piece of Call Me Mr.
Absolutely. The relationships are incredible. Of course, when you're, college age students, you got laws that, prevent you from disclosure with grades and things like that. So it's a little more difficult with engagement on a college level. But Marty, you hit on a very important piece for us, is that partnerships, collaborations, connections, relationships is a strategic development in the skill sets of our misters, that we help try to help them understand the value of developing positive relationships and how to extend yourself to develop positive relationships, because you never know day to day who you're going to meet, and it's not that you're looking to be an opportunist every turn, but you should, as long as you're open-hearted and open-minded, your connection in those relationships can be valuable. Again, we're teachers teaching others, teaching children. Many of our students are very angry. They're very upset with their world. They have negative influences that disturb them, and we try to develop the kind of relationships with children that bring, that get them to at least cope with those attitudes, to get them to the next level. There's multiple reasons why students drop out over the course of a 12-year period. To even think and be comfortable with losing half of our school children is just unimaginable to me in 2009. I mean, it's just, I would have never have thought that, even 25 years ago, that we would be in this position to lose so many of our young people. So yes, those collaborations and partnerships are vital.
We're nearing the end of our time together, but there's a couple of things I wanted to mention. One, of course, is the national recognition you got on Oprah. Everybody needs to know that you were the recipient of her largesse with the Angel Network, and that's certainly something to be commended, to be standing out to that level. And I remember watching that particular program. It was very heartwarming and marvelous. But the other thing that's at a different way of looking at the success of Call Me Mister is the fact that you have a 2009 Fulbright Scholar, and I saw that in your PowerPoints. I just want to say, tell us a little bit about that story. And
a couple of things. Of course, Oprah recognized, and our first cohort entered as freshmen in 2000. It was spring of 2001 when we got Oprah's attention, and Oprah, through her Angel Network, and presented her Angel Network Award to Jeff Davis, and presented to our program $100,000. It wasn't recurring $100,000 every year, but it helped get us on the map in terms of recognition and help support our program. So we're forever grateful for that kind of recognition. All of the students that were involved in the program, every one of them were freshmen at the time, and every one of them have graduated and are now outstanding teachers to this day. So I don't know, the moral of the story is that you have to be an Oprah to be successful. But that again, it's exposure to experiences and creating experiences that make a difference. We were very proud to have Abdurrahman Watkins be recognized as a 2009-2010 Fulbright Scholar. Ab just finished his student teaching this past spring and was named Fulbright Scholar after applying for the scholarship. He will be teaching beginning in the fall in Indonesia to fulfill his Fulbright. But he will be teaching in Indonesia for the full academic year before returning back to South Carolina to resume his teaching work in South Carolina. Ab was a graduate of Edisto High School out of Orangeburg, South Carolina, and again, it's another example, as we have many who have come out of South Carolina. We take some pretty heavy hits nationwide for our standing in education, but the fact of the matter is that we do have talent within this state that is just waiting to be tapped and willing and anxious to give back. And that's what our program provides. We believe that recruitment has never been an issue for us. We've had over 20,000 inquiries in our program within the last 18 to 24 months, competing for no more than 60 spaces in South Carolina. So recruitment is not really our problem. Never has been. We've always believed the talent was out there, and through Ab Watkins and others within our program, graduated from our program, they've proven that we can grow our own student teachers, and they will go back into the communities and make a heck of a difference.
Well, this is wonderful because they are so needed. And hey, just tell Ab that when he gets back, we want to have him here to tell us about his year. I'm sure he will.
Got it. Oh,
he will have an incredible. Yes,
absolutely.
Well, I know we're running short on time, but there was one other aspect of this, Roy, if we could just take a minute or two to talk about that is of interest to me and hopefully to others. This strategy, effective teaching, has been one of the 15 strategies, and we define that in lots of ways. But you succeeded, I think, in defining that today, in one dimension anyway, is the relationships that are built with students, and we know how important that is. This whole culture of success that a teacher can build in a classroom or not have in a classroom. And effective teaching in that form and in every other form, the academic part also, really is a result of our pre-service training programs. We discussed earlier, I came up through a program called Teacher Corps, interestingly enough, about 40 years ago, when there was a shortage of teachers, again. And I see so many elements of that Teacher Corps program in this program, and it occurs to me how powerful a framework it is really for all of our pre-service teacher education. We need this kind of program specifically. Because we need more males in the classroom, specifically in the elementary classroom, and specifically more African-American males in those classrooms. 40 years ago, I was a male elementary teacher, and I was the only one in that school. There were a handful of us across the state, so this has been an ongoing problem. But I'm just, the question really is, can you see impact that this program has had on regular on the regular pre-service teacher programs within institutions of higher ed, and is that a goal to work toward?
That's an outstanding question, Sam. It affects. It has had an impact in different places because Clemson University, for example, is a very different environment than in Claflin University, or Benedict from a college of Charleston, and the time does make some difference, but we believe that that just the insertion of diversity, and diversity not just in terms of gender and race, but a diversity of thinking, and diversity within the social order. The perspectives are changed. Anytime you have a homogeneous environment, and it doesn't matter whether it's homogeneous and extreme black or extreme white, there's no way that you benefit without interaction that is from people who think differently from you when that is introduced into that particular setting. So we think it's not been a objective of Call Me Mr. Per se, because our objective was address the shortage.
Sure.
But what we are learning as a sidebar, if you will, is that once the Misters have gotten themselves into a teacher ed program in any significant numbers, and you consider that we've got 20 Misters at Clemson University alone, and and Clemson is the largest producer of teachers within South Carolina. And the population within Clemson is a largely white female population. The impact of having that, significant number coming in and dealing with students at risk, coming in and addressing that in class conversations, where students may struggle with knowing how to deal with a student from a single parent background being raised by a grandmother who's not sure where the next meal is going to come from, or there's been domestic violence, or dad was in jail last night, and you're finding yourself in a classroom as a student teacher or a student intern trying to deal with that, because now the child is angry, the child is acting out. It has nothing to do whether he wants to learn anything. He's just mad. He's mad at the world, and he's not going to. He sees you, and you're in his way. So if someone is not familiar at all with that kind of background, you have to get help. And what we are finding is many of our misters who have been engaged in many scenarios have found themselves being in positions of being advisors to their classmates and also learning in turn. So the ability to have conversation and dialogue and that's real on those issues is I've seen it work. And I've also seen it rejected. I've also seen the assumption that you're male, and you don't know anything about teaching third graders. So so I've seen the reverse is true. But does it have an impact on the culture, Sam? Absolutely. It absolutely has a tremendous impact on the culture, and we believe Mr. is a model for development within the majority community.
Yeah. And I would have to agree with that. Well,
absolutely.
We've come to the end of our time. Roy, it is evident to us, we know you, and I'm sure it's evident to our listeners now that you certainly don't lack passion for the work that you do. It comes across loud and clear, and we're so happy to be able to introduce you and the Call Me Mr. program to our listeners because we think this is such an important program. It has, I used the word systemic earlier, but it has such direct relevance to all of the strategies that we advocate, and more so it is in the training of teachers. And I won't talk even in terms of male teachers or African American male teachers, but in training teachers really in the strategies that we employ. So it's really putting them into practice, effective classroom instruction, creating an emotionally safe school environment, mentoring, service learning, and I could go on and on. So it integrates all of those, and it's such a powerful program.
Absolutely. This is, as always, a great learning experience because we've always been proud of Call Me Mr., but the details that I've learned in the last several days talking with you, Roy, have impacted me. And one of the things that we were talking about earlier also is this getting out into the community, such an important piece. And as a strong advocate of service learning for that very reason and service learning in teacher education, you do that so well. And sometimes the barriers that people sense through their coursework and the parameters they have there, you've overcome them by having these be co-curricular activities and that students can learn outside the classroom as well as inside the classroom. It sounds like your students really are doing that. So this has been a terrific hour plus, and it is every minute has been fantastic. Thank you for being with us. Sam?
And thank you.
Oh, well, our pleasure. Absolutely. We want to remind our listeners that this radio webcast, like all the monthly programs, is going to be archived within half an hour, right, Eric? On our website. So you can go back and listen again. We can all go back and listen again, see how we sounded. But we recommend that you encourage your friends and your colleagues to listen and perhaps use this for a future professional development activity for entire faculty or community group. And so now I want to kind of talk about what's going to be happening next month. And one of the components of Call Me Mr. was mentoring, and we're going to focus on mentoring next month. We are very lucky to have Kate Schneller of the National Mentoring Partnership coming on board to talk to us in general about mentoring, but then specifically about a program called Caretaker's Choice, which is a mentoring program, a national mentoring program that they are coordinating with children of incarcerated parents. And sadly, we're seeing a bit too much of that these days. One program note, because of our travels next month, Sam, we are going to have to do this on the third Tuesday of June, which is June 16th. So it's still in the teens. It's still early enough in the month, and we hope you'll all be able to join us at that time. Now, the broadcast is available on this particular website and also, on iPod or MP3 players because we're on iTunes. So subscribe to Solutions, and you will get every month's program to listen to again and again. So appreciate your listening to us again and again.
And we want to thank all of you for listening and participating. And again, remember, we know why students are dropping out of school. And with research-based solutions, we can assure that all of our students graduate. Join us next month for more Solutions to the Dropout Crisis.